life.
The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. What shocks our collective consciousness? We have become so desensitized to the horrors of the world. Footage of war zones we peruse on our phones while sipping on our tea. Child rapes, stabbings, shootings. We watch these news stories and say, what has come of this world? And we switch off our TVs, keep aside our devices and move on. We have become so used to injustice becoming normalized, as long as we're not the ones at the brunt of it. In a backdrop where collective action is crucial, how must we go about reviving social consciousness in order to bring forth a society that is just and equitable? Let's have the conversation. My guest tonight is a former Mrs. Sri Lanka, one of the founders of Women in Need, a sportswoman and a women and child rights advocate. Caryll Tozer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sonali, for having me.
Absolutely. To begin the conversation on reviving social consciousness, what do you believe are the root causes behind the decline in social consciousness among the people of Sri Lanka, especially in the context of maladministration and political frustrations?
So, Sonali, when we talk about social consciousness, it's usually triggered by empathy for others. It's also about caring for those who are marginalized and underprivileged. It's also talking about the needs of other people put before your own. And I really think in our society, somehow over the years, people have been frustrated with how things work. They have been upset that their lives have not been improved. And so everybody is fighting for a place within themselves, how they can improve their lot. And they forget about everybody, the other people who are also affected. I think the root cause of some of this, not all of it, is I think political mismanagement, how politicians actually take, for instance, democracy. Democracy is supposed to be a separation of the legislature and the executive, and unfortunately I think there are very blurred lines between what is truth and what is untrue. And someone told me that when a politician is elected to power, the first thing that they do is think about how to stay in power rather than how they are going to uplift the lives of the people. And so we have frustration building up amongst the people that their voices are not heard, and politicians are only elected by them and they are given various incentives to vote for certain people. So we are also party to this mismanagement, if you will, because we are electing people who are totally unsuited to the position of office that they are elected.
Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. We find that in today's context, there is a great deal of hatred that the citizens have against those in office, which is not supposed to be the case.
Right.
Those who are elected as people's representatives are meant to act in the best interests of the people, and there are procedures, protocols governing this.
Right.
So where have we gone wrong?
So, you know, when you talk about the legislature, their duty is to set laws. And I find some of this is my opinion, that some of the laws that are set is to ensure that their longevity is protected. There is longevity in power. As you said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. They forget that the needs of the people have to be met. Social programs should be brought forth that help a just and equal society for all. Now, in reality, does that work even worldwide? Maybe not, but we can only think, they say, think globally but work locally. So I think politicians have to pay extra attention as to what has soured the people. Why are they so upset? why are people, for instance, the Aragalaya came forward. So I believe initially the Aragalaya was a very organic movement that people like us, everybody, stepped out because they believed that politicians were serving themselves rather than the people. Maybe subsequently, various people were trying to take ownership of the Aragalaya. But to the average person, they didn't come in trains and buses and walked miles and miles to serve any master. They came because it was the need of the hour to see a change because things were going from bad to worse. We are also responsible for having kept quiet so many years. But when you keep quiet, you build up, and then at one point you actually burst, right? So I think that was the moment of the Aragalaya, that people had kept quiet so long, been pushed to the extremes. They were told by politicians and various people that, times are going to get better. We had 30 years of war. Were those problems that created that war in the first place addressed? I think not. Were they disappeared, whether it was in the north or the south? Did they have redress, the families? I don't think so. And so all this just builds to the fore. And I think a lot of the time racial and religious disharmony was created to engage the people, the masses, in something apart from what was actually going down.
There's something called the boiling frog phenomenon.
Exactly.
And I think we're a party to it.
Yeah, we are party to it. Politicians who kept quiet. See, I don't think anybody in the political sphere is exempt from blame. Same as some of us, those who have a voice, who could speak. Did we object at the time? Yes, we stepped out and objected because we saw so many injustices being meted out, and the brunt of it was was taken by the people. So we are also party to it. Did we not shout loud enough? We couldn't get 50 people to come out and speak. It was the same 50 people speaking on behalf of women's rights, on, various issues, child rights, whether it was the destruction of the environment. So we are all party to it, and I think even the majority of politicians in the parliament were also responsible. Maybe they didn't do some of this, but by their very silence, they were also responsible.
So we are complicit by our own silence and ignorance. Let's also talk about the genesis of the Aragalaya. We spoke briefly about it. For us to intervene in the Aragalaya, for the Colombo crowd to intervene in the Aragalaya, it had to come to a point where we ourselves were personally affected. And those in the north and east had been protesting for years and years. And nobody noticed, nobody took notice. It was only when our livelihoods were being affected that we actually got onto the streets.
Correct.
Which shows the absolute hypocrisy of it.
Yeah.
The self-centered nature of it.
So that is that's the social consciousness I'm talking about, right? People were crying for years. People's lives were affected for years. Were there voices? Yes. I think there were individuals and groups that they call CSO projects, right? Who actually went out there to help the people. For instance, if you take plant, it's a shoot of the WNPS, the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society, that set up a trust to try and buy back pieces of land to protect for the future, to put it in a trust to protect for the future. Right. There's Shanti Margam, who set up a center to help children from underprivileged backgrounds, and a suicide hotline with mental health. Sure. Then there's, these are ones that I know of, there's certainly Be the Change Sri Lanka, who started food security program, and they started this nearly 2.5 years ago. So they saw these food shortages and food issues coming. So they had empathy for other people. So they started this program where the kids in schools were given the wherewithal to actually grow, so they could have maybe one free meal a day in the school.
Right.
So there were organizations like that who came up and served because they had empathy for others, their humanitarian work. And those who couldn't step out themselves, they could donate to these causes.
Sure.
So they didn't wait for these politicians who are muddling along, literally. Sorry to be so frank, but they didn't wait for them. They said, we are going to be the change. And I think it's in each one of us to be the change that we are seeking. Each one of us has the power within ourselves to do something to make somebody else's life better.
Absolutely. We are in conversation with Caryll Tozer. We're going for a break. We'll be right back.
The People's Platform.
President seeks to enhance Indo-Sri Lankan trade relations for mutual benefit. Adani delegation meets Minister Kanchana. Leading monks dismayed over attempts to sell national assets. Sri Lanka Air Force headquarters buildings officially given to the Sri Lanka police. Anura responds to Basil's claims, saying the government is led by SLPP. Gammadda brings lasting solutions to the drinking water issue in remote Mihintale.
The People's Platform.
Welcome back. You're watching The People's Platform. I'm in conversation with rights activist Caryll Tozer. Caryll, what role do you think grassroots organizations and community leaders can play in fostering social consciousness, in mobilizing people towards positive change?
So I think, people went through this period of apathy and frustration. Apathy in a lot of ways, sometimes it helped us, right? Because whatever the politicians or the world threw at us, we took it in our stride. When the tsunami happened, people survived. They got over that period, however hard it was. Some of them had to actually earn a living, so they had to get back to work and do what they had to do. But that's also something that while I believe is something which is a strong point in Sri Lankans, that we can deal with a lot of the stuff that's been thrown our way, that's also what we are in a way cursed with, because we take it in our stride.
Yeah.
And that is what has brought us to this moment. And I think with technology, kids programs, for instance, to answer firstly what you asked about what the grassroots levels, I think we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to create a hope. And that is done with also unifying the people. I think when we have unity amongst ourselves, we can achieve that much more. I think disunity serves others who have their own agendas.
Sure.
But for us to get together, I think grassroots levels, we have to also communicate to the people that when you vote, please vote for somebody within your community even, who does a job of work, who has been doing a job of work with no rewards expected or wanted. I think we have made a big mistake in the past voting on party lines. So we have to get this message to the people saying, please, don't vote for 2 buckets, 2 roofing sheets that you're given, or even a cell phone. You take whatever is given to you if you want to. But please vote for somebody who is going to make your life better, because you are also responsible to be the change. Be party to the change. Don't give bribes. When you expect a job of work, expect them to serve you. Politicians are elected to serve you. But we, the people, also must serve ourselves. We can't always wait for somebody else to give us a handout. So I think grassroots level, we need to take this message across, saying, in the future, build hope in the people. Build the possibility that we can be the change and a catalyst for change, that we'll have a better tomorrow. We have to believe that. That's why even as rights activists, we continue what we do, because we believe in hope.
Right.
Because if you don't believe in it, you have to step aside and not do anything.
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
So, going to children, perhaps. I think we have to bring in community service for every child who requires a school leaving certificate. Whether it's 20 hours of community service or 25 hours of community service, children should be taught community service and social consciousness. With all that we are teaching kids in school, all the homework, the tuition, that's not helping, because each child is becoming quite selfish today.
Yeah.
And with technology and phones and iPads and iPhones and whatever it is you want, and television, you're not programmed to think anymore.
Yeah.
Everything is fed to the kid. So we have to bring this where the kids do community service, whether they go to the hospitals and do some service, or they go to the prisons and do some service, or simply start a Stop the Litter campaign. I mean, there are so many ideas, right? You look around Sri Lanka, covered in litter. Where is your social consciousness? How could you throw some scraps on? I've seen, and somebody said to me, well, it's the underprivileged. I said, no, I've seen people throwing things out of buses and cars, fancy cars. So we have to create this social consciousness in our children.
Absolutely.
And hope that things will improve for tomorrow,
In order to create this attitudinal shift societally, this requires education. We need to equip ourselves with the education to know that we are just a part of a much larger ecosystem with the trees and the birds and the rivers, that we are just one small part of all of this, and that we live with this larger ecosystem. How must this education be streamlined? So
between you and I think kids are spoon-fed lots of irrelevant information, right? We also have to change with the times. I think the education system must also be changed. Children must be made to participate in social events. Back in the day, kids went to the underprivileged homes, and actually addressed wounds of the elderly, swept their houses. Those are things that kids did. How could we have gone so far away from what was right and become such a selfish society?
Yeah.
And I think parents also now work. They have to work twice as hard to earn a living.
Yeah.
And I understand that they have to do this to ensure that their kids are fed and food is put on the table. However, I think parents need to spend more time with their children, talking about social issues and social norms. We have to use all the tools that are at our disposal, whether it's interactive drama, whether it's, we need to take this message across to the kids and also the wider audience. Create spaces where we can have dialogue. I'm as guilty as, looking at those memes and having a laugh occasionally, or getting angry about something and tweeting out. I think I also have to learn. As I said to you, we are all party to this change if we want to see the change. So we have to use every tool that is at our disposal to make a huge paradigm shift in how we operate. Be a kinder society.
Yeah. So arts, culture and media can be used as powerful tools.
Absolutely. And also in schools, as I said, whether it's the environment, look, it's the very lifeblood of our existence, the environment. Why are we so ready to destroy it? We don't need to be taught empathy, but if parents talk to their children about it, being empathetic towards those who are in need, or whether it's the animals who are suffering, or whether the environment, or like you said, the rivers and the streams, we don't throw our litter all over and walk away, right? Because it all bungs up the rivers and the streams, and it comes back on us in the long run. Whether the animals are eating this garbage on the way, so all these are part of a larger picture of social consciousness. We don't have to say, okay, I'm going to be socially conscious and do X. There's so many areas that we can contribute in.
Absolutely. Another aspect that I'd like your perspectives on is the apathy and cynicism that some of us as Sri Lankans have. Sometimes we hear people say things like, I don't vote because it doesn't affect me. Whoever is appointed, it doesn't affect my life. And that is such a privileged stance to take, and it's also rather unfair, collectively speaking. How do you view that?
So I've had people say to me, I'm not going to vote.
Yeah.
But that's the only free will we have, literally. You know, there are laws and things that govern the rest, right? So the only thing we can say is we can vote. That's the only choice I have to vote for one or the other. Right? As you said, you know, you have to be privileged to say, hey, I'm not going to vote, because actually that vote counts for those in power, I believe, if you don't vote. Your not voting doesn't do any world of good for anybody. I think that is where, again, social consciousness matters. Because if you had a conscience, you wouldn't say that. You wouldn't say, I'm not going to vote and let whatever happens, happens. Because as you said, the privileged can afford to live. But it's those that are marginalized and, underprivileged that have to ensure that they bring in the right people. We have to give them a lead. I mean, those of us in Colombo, voting matters. And empathy for others matter. Humanitarian work matters. And if you don't have the time to give, you can always donate to a cause.
Yeah.
And ensure we actually leave a better society than we found. At the moment, what is happening is societal norms are dictating to us. We should be setting the societal norms. And those of us here in Colombo need to actually wake up and say, listen, I'm going to leave a better tomorrow.
Each of us can play a significant part. Speak to us about the story of how you founded Women in Need, because this is fascinating.
So I entered this competition at push of my family, my sister, and I didn't think I was any beauty as such, but I believed in myself to do whatever I wanted to do. And so I was told, if you're ever asked a question, please don't talk about abuse of women, because at that point I was telling everybody, we need to set up a center to help abused women. And so guess what? When I was asked, that's the first thing I said. But somebody read that and read what I had said and reached out to me and said, listen, if you're serious, I'll find the funding to start a center to help abused women. Now, I'm not involved with Women in Need anymore because I've moved on to other things, but I still think it's my baby, and I believe in it. And 30 years later, here we are with a center to help abused women. So that's why I said, it's in the power of each one of us to make a difference if we dream, if we believe. That's the start of Women in Need. And a friend reached out to me and said, hey, you started Women in Need, can I start? Can you tell me how you got about it? And there comes Shanti Margam.
Yeah, Kamani
Jinadasa. So, it's amazing how each little thing that you do can affect a larger population.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's also bring in the policymakers. They are a key stakeholder in ensuring that the citizens have a better life. How must the policymakers be conscious of creating this paradigm shift?
So when you talk about policymakers, there's the legislature. So at the moment, what they have been doing is serving one master or two masters or whatever. Some of them don't even understand the issue at hand. And we saw this overseas as well, with Obamacare. Those people are uneducated to deal with an issue. I find a bigger problem dealing with those who are educated, who know what is right and wrong, and still choose to do the wrong thing. This is a lack of conscience. This is serving one master rather than the people as a whole. So I think policymakers need to say enough is enough. It is not for us to protect politicians or anybody who wants to stay in power. It is for us to do something that our families are going to be proud of, the country is going to be proud of. So set policy that serves the people. And if you actually lead a country or lead a department and you're doing really well, you have something to be proud of rather than leave something that is broken down. So I think policymakers have to set things that are, socially effective to help raise the standard of living of everybody and serve laws and set laws and policies that are for the good of all, not just a few.
My final question to you, these efforts to revive social consciousness must be inclusive and also representative of the diverse perspectives and experiences of all of the Sri Lankan peoples.
So, we are 52% women in this country. During the COVID lockdown, we did a program on Zoom called Wisdom Women Sri Lanka. 5 women and a bhikkhuni got together and we talked about these real issues in every show, and people had nothing to do at home, so they sat and watched all of this, right? But we talked about different areas of what affects us.
Yeah.
How men deal with situations, how women deal with the same situation but with a different angle. We need to bring more women into the picture.
Yes.
Because we also bring in more ideas, different types of ideas into the picture. And then we spread set these people to go out into the rural areas and take this message across, like Kanta Samitiyas or, and what can they do, not just a place for women to just hang out, but actually what they can do to uplift their areas, their village, for instance, right? And the men can do the same thing. This is not only for the women. So I think we need to get participation from everybody. It's not about, I think Sri Lankans have a bit of the servile mentality.
Okay.
If you will. They like to say yes and bow down to people.
Yeah.
And what is that? We need to change that and say, hey, I'm also a person in my own right. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to bring a family forth and teach my children to be better than I am. That's what we strived. Whatever I struggled with, I didn't want my children to have that. I wanted them to do better than me. And everybody I came into contact with, I always said to them, taking English out of the curriculum and making this link language that we had was a positive. We took it out. Because we could be unified with that language. Whatever language we spoke, we could be unified having that. So simple things like that, I think we have to revisit. And if policymakers are serious, if politicians are serious to make a change, let's bring forth a country that is developing and good for everybody, serves everybody's interest, not just for a few. So I have hope that we can do this, but we need to have more people getting energized and getting conscious and having empathy and doing some humanitarian work or donating or whichever way you can contribute to change society and make it a better place for all of us. I really think you should engage then. So the other thing is, I think it served politicians to divide people by race or religion. I really think we as a people need to be smarter. We need to smarten up because this serves nobody. Growing up, I remember, we celebrated each other's differences. Where did we lose it? It was consciously done, trust me. It was consciously done because you can distract the people by bringing some bogus, ghost or ghostly figure into the mix and saying, you worry about that while I get on with what I have to do to protect myself and my family. So all that needs to change and people need to be engaged and be smarter.
Caryll Tozer, thank you very much for sharing your perspectives. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Sonali. Thank you for having me and hope we make a change somehow.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for watching us. We'll